Hello everyone and welcome to the video, and today we're going to be talking about how to play Wraith. So this is going to be an Apex Predator Wraith guide, but before we get into the video, if you guys could please drop a like on the video as well as sub to the channel, it would help me out a very lot. And I make content like this quite often. I make a lot of guides on different legends as well as just some decent gameplay. So if you guys are into that, make sure to drop that sub. But with that out of the way, let's get right into the video. So the first thing we always talk about with these guide videos is the legend's actual abilities. So the first one we're going to talk about is Wraith's passive. In Season 10, Wraith actually got a new passive, and she could essentially find where care packages are. This isn't exactly useful, but it is something to note. As well as her actual passive, she's able to see when someone is aiming at her, and there are a few things that you want to differentiate, because there is a voice line where she says someone's aiming at me, and then there's also one where she says there's a sniper. And if she says there's a sniper, then you need to be immediately aware that there could potentially be a Kraber in play. So you definitely want to be careful of that and mindful of that, especially if it's later in the game. You can almost usually assume that you are being aimed at with a Kraber, so you just want to make sure that you use that quip to tell your team, especially if you're solo queuing, you want to communicate that, because the last thing you need is some random peeking and getting his head taken off. So you just want to make sure that you communicate that properly if there is a sniper, and just in general, if someone's aiming at you, it's nice to know a lot of times. And there is a third voice quip that she says, and that's if there's a trap, and this one is pretty much useless, because by the time she says there's a trap, you've probably already stepped in it. I don't know why it works that way, but it is pretty useless. But for the most part, just make sure you're communicating whenever that does pop up, and understand the difference between the sniper one and the regular one. So now we're going to talk about Wraith's Q, or her tactical, and this is her phase. And you just want to make sure that you're using this purely as a getaway. You never really want to use this to go in. This is a great ability to use on rotations as well if you need to rotate, especially with the portal, and you don't want to take as much damage. You can use the phase mixed with the portal, or just use the phase to go from one piece of cover to the next. My favorite way to use phase is to play super aggressive and not really care about positioning as much, and then try to get as much damage off as possible, and then phase out. You don't really have to be very mindful of your positioning, because when your phase is up, if you're in a bad position, you could just phase out. If you're overextended, you could phase out and go back to your team, go back to cover to where it's safe. So I like to get a lot of damage in. The only problem with this, I would say, is not having enough communication with your teammates, because a lot of times if I'm solo queuing and I go for a very aggressive angle and I try to poke them or even get a knock, and then I'll phase out and go back, a lot of times my teammates will literally just follow me in, and when I phase out, they're kind of just left there to die. So you just want to be mindful of that as well, and try to have as much communication as you can. Sometimes it's not exactly possible, and randoms are obviously not always predictable. But I'd say without a doubt, I love playing Wraith because of the ability to not really care about positioning. You can play super aggressive, and you always have that get out of jail free card, and I think that's the best way to use her phase. Another thing to note about the phase is that you always want to use it behind cover. You never really want to use it in front of somebody, because there is a long wind-up animation that oftentimes will get you killed. If you have to use it in front of somebody, since you are slowed when you're using it, you just want to make sure that you're strafing and crouch strafing and moving very unpredictably, so you can mitigate as much damage as possible. But for the most part, you definitely just want to go behind cover and use it. You could also use the phase as kind of a fake out. If you dip behind cover, you can cancel the phase. So you go behind cover, everyone's going to think you're going to phase, and you can cancel the phase, and they'll obviously be like super aggro and charge at you and try to get that final kill, and you can usually fry them for it. But this is very situational, obviously. But in order to cancel the phase, you can climb an object, but you actually have to do the climbing animation. You can't just mantle. As well as you can use your healing, or you can use your portal to cancel it as well. So these are all just different ways to cancel it, and it's kind of useful if you accidentally press it, or like I said in the situation explained before. Now we're going to be talking about Wraith's portal, and this is the one that actually got a buff in Season 16. It is now 150 meters, which is twice as long, and 50 meters longer than the old portal, I believe, so it can go pretty far. And she actually also speeds up the longer she's in it, so you actually get a nice movement speed boost towards the end of the portal, and it's very useful. But for the most part, the best method of using the portal is for rotations. There's tons of different things I can talk about here, and I can go over this for an hour about different situations where you might need the portal, but for the most part, it's pretty simple. You can dumb it down to the fact that if you need to go from point A to point B and you need to rotate your entire team, if you have teammates that don't exactly have movement abilities, this is where Wraith really shines. She's great at getting your team from point A to point B in a better position, and just rotating in general. In the higher level lobbies, especially towards late game, you're always going to be looking for a better position, and Wraith kind of gives you the ability to get to that next position without taking too much damage and getting your team there safely. You could also use Wraith's portal in an aggressive way during the fight, and this is a way that I don't see a lot of people use Wraith's portal, and this is going for an off angle with Wraith. If you guys are not familiar with what an off angle means, you're essentially just forcing your opponent to move a certain way or do a certain thing, or you're giving yourself the opportunity to have a new angle to potentially fry the enemy, because if they're behind a rock and you go all the way far right to it or far left of it, you'll be able to have free shots on them, kind of force them out of that cover, and your team will be able to shoot them, so that you kind of put them in a situation where they either have to get fried by you, or they leave the cover and then get shot by your team. And this is very, very good, but you just want to make sure that you're using your portal for this and not just the phase, because a lot of times if you go for an off angle, if the team is smart, they will just push you since they know you're alone, and that's why it's nice you could just go back into the portal and you're completely safe. And this is great for getting a lot of damage off, forcing enemies out of cover, and getting knocks. It's an awesome way to use the portal, and I definitely recommend trying this. Another way of using the portal is to portal out a down teammate. This is something that is very, very important. A lot of times your teammate will get down, and if there's multiple teams in the area, this is where this really shines, because you can portal them out, and you and your teammate will be there. One can stick the res, and if they come through the portal, unless they 3-stack it, the first kid that comes through is pretty much getting one clipped. So you just want to make sure that you are mindful that they could take the portal, but a lot of times you'll be able to get the res off and reset, and it's really, really good for that. Another tip I have for just the portal in general, if you are being chased and you know the enemy is going to take it, this can happen in a plethora of situations, but you can throw grenades at it. It's nice to keep grenades. If it's in the open, you can throw a grenade directly vertical, straight up, and it will come down and land directly on the portal. But it's kind of hard to time this, but you could do it effectively and get literally 100 damage on the first kid that comes through, or if they triple stack it, you can get 100 damage on all three of them. You could also throw a thermite at the ground by the portal, or an arc star at the ground. It all works the same. You're going to be doing massive damage to the person, and if it's with an arc star, they're going to be stunned, and it's a free one clip. So you just want to make sure that you understand that if people are going to be taking the portal after you and chasing you down, you have a very, very large advantage. And another tip I actually have is if someone's chasing you and you don't have grenades and you go through the portal, the second you get out of the portal, just walk backwards, and you will now be behind them, and you will have a free first clip to shoot them. And this is very, very valuable too, because they won't exactly know where you are. You will, like I said, be behind them, and they'll have to turn around before they can start shooting you. And now we're just going to talk about a couple miscellaneous uses of Wraith's portal. One of these is kidnapping. And basically what this means is you are going to be using the portal to essentially grab somebody from the other teams. You're going to be using the portal by you and running down and placing the portal directly on the enemy. Now, if you place it directly on them, they're going to bounce out of it. They actually patched that a very long time ago, so you want to place it kind of behind them or in a spot where you feel like they may move next. It's very hard to pull off, but it could be massive for your team if you can actually pull it off. You just want to make sure that when you are using this technique that you use the portal in a way where the enemy can't go back through it. So as I'm showing you guys on screen right now, I use the portal from a higher place and I jump off of it, and it's kind of hard to do this. You definitely want to practice this in the range if you're not familiar with the technique, but you just want to use it so the portal goes off midair and they will not be able to get back through it if you do get the successful kidnap. So once you go back through it, they will fall. They won't be able to get back in it, and they're essentially dead. If their team follows them, their team dies too. And another miscellaneous use of Wraith's portal is a technique called coiling your portal, and this is very, very situational because it pretty much requires you to be in an end game where it turns out to be a heal off. So a lot of times in ranked, the storm will close completely, and you will be faced with a situation where you basically have to out heal the other teams. And all you have to do for this is just go in circles with your portal, continue going in circles, and then bring your portal all the way to the end of the zone and just go through it twice. You definitely want to go through it twice. It will disappear after the second time going through it, and after that you're just going to use a phase. If you do this, you essentially will win every single heal off. And another tip that I actually forgot about is using your portal to close down doors. So a lot of times if you're in a building, the doors will get blown off, and if you're in ranked, people will try to use that as an opportunity to push, especially if you don't have any defensive legends like Caustic or Watson. But essentially, if there are 2 entrances in the building that you are in, and you put the start of the portal on one door and the end of the portal on the other door, enemies will not be able to get in. If they do try to walk in, they will go into the portal, and you know exactly where they're coming out from, and it's a free 1-clip. And the last tip I have for you guys is to just understand when the portal closes. They actually changed it. It used to be at 35%, and I think 25% or 28%. I forget the exact number, but I believe now it's when the portal is at 21% cooldown without a golden helmet and 28% with a golden helmet. I'm not entirely sure if I'm accurate with that, but I will put a clip on screen showing you guys exactly what I mean. That's when you know the portal is going to close. You want to be mindful of this. You want to communicate it with your team, because there's nothing worse than going towards the portal and then it disappears when you need it the most. So that's pretty much it for today's video. I probably did forget something. There's so much to go over in guides like this, especially in a battle royale game with abilities, because there's so many different ways to use her abilities, and overall it would pretty much be impossible to go through all of this without making an hour-long video. But I hope this guide helped you guys out a lot. Like I said, if you enjoyed this video or it helped you, make sure to drop a like and a sub to the channel. But that's pretty much it for me today. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.